Hello there, today we're going to be filling a gap in my Angmar project. Namely, we are going to finally tackle the GûLVAHAR problem. I've had various ideas of how to do this in the past, ranging from modifying the original sculpt to sculpting a scratch one entirely based on one of my favorite pieces of artwork. Neither of those ever worked out because I saw this. This is the Vampire Queen miniatures, sculpted by Anna Polansk and created by Andrew May. A collaboration between Meridian Miniatures and the Gardens of Hecate. These are some of my favorite creators ever in the independent model scene, and I have desperately wanted to get some of their models for years. So when this one appeared and fit so perfectly, I couldn't resist. This model comes with a couple of head options, wings, and a tail. And obviously I chose the horrific bat face and wings. And while I initially was planning to use the tail, I ultimately opted against it. This actually comes down to my first criticism, as like a lot of independent miniatures, there's a certain fit here that isn't as precise as I might like, or what you might find in a full production model. But the sculpt is so natural and organic that it's pretty easy to blend this all together with some green stuff. So a little bit of pinning, gluing, and sculpting later, and we've got the miniature ready to go. I quickly based it up on a 60mm base in the same way as the rest of my Angmar army, and got to work with the painting. Before that, though, I wanted to talk about my love of miniature Kickstarters, as I've got a few now. Whether it's the original Baron War releases, Fogu models, or various other small scale projects. And a quick side here, it may not be a Kickstarter, but I do have this amazing box from Enviro Games, who did send it to me for free a while ago, and I wanted to do something with it for ages, but never did. Regardless, it is an amazing set. The game looks interesting, the models are gorgeous, and Enviro Games' responsibility project-wise is something that I admire hugely, and I'm really sorry for not mentioning them more before, so take a look at them. As for the priming, I did a base coat of gray, followed by a heavier than I wanted zenithal of off-white. And it's important to remember at this step to drop the miniature multiple times, resulting in various breakages that required multiple rounds of repairs and repriming and sculpting, and it really sucked, and I was very mad. Another slight complaint there is that, like a lot of independent miniature production companies, the resin has amazing detail qualities, but it's definitely a little bit brittle, particularly at these wingtips, so be careful. I'm going to be painting this model a little bit differently from usual, taking huge inspiration from GÜLVAHAR Miniatures, who's painted tons of fantastic stuff in the past and also has done a bunch of Kickstarters. He's actually even painted this same model, and I'm really going to try not to make it just look like his, but there's definitely going to be some similarities. The first step, though, was applying a pretty heavy dry brush of a off-white over the whole thing, as while this does kind of blend into the zenithal I did, this is the tone I plan to use for highlights later, so I just want to make sure that matches the ultimate tone. Then I prepped the base in my usual way before taking out the washes. I applied a slightly watered down blue wash to all of the under recesses, as well as the kind of general bottom half of the model, and the base itself, followed by a brown wash over all of the upper facing sections and blending that into the blue. Obviously, this is how I've done the rest of my Angmar project. If you've seen that, you know. Let's move on. Once that was dry, though, I basically finished painting the base using a couple of rounds of dry brushing in different tones, and continued that off-white dry brush I used to finish onto the rest of the miniature as well, to bring back those highlighted areas after the washes toned them down a little bit more than I wanted, as we're going to be painting this model mainly with washes and glazes. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail here, as basically after applying a overall flesh tone wash across the whole thing, I started going in with various different reds and blues and browns to get some interesting color combinations on here. I was sure to add some specific stuff in some details, like a dark brown onto all of the fur details to make it stand out from the pale body, but from there it really was very trial and error. One thing of note though, as while I did use quite a few contrasts in this step, a lot of my contrast paints have started to go bad. That's not really the right term. Basically, they've gotten very thick and gloopy at the bottom of it. And part of that might be from the fact that some of these are original run contrast paints when they were first released, so they are getting up there. But I was able to bring them back pretty confidently with just a little bit of water and contrast medium and some vigorous stirring at various different levels. This would be a great opportunity to also speak about one of my other inspirations, namely vampires. I definitely was thinking most about the vampires in the Witcher 3 video game, as particularly the lesser ones are so weird and nasty looking and just have such a cool aesthetic that I wanted to bring along here, and I think that this model in particular captures that pretty darn well. The other question is GûLVAHAR a vampire? Vampires are really interesting in the Tolkien world in that there is almost no actual mention of them, but they are specifically mentioned. So there's a lot of debate in the Tolkien world about what that actually means. Are these classical, vampires? Are these just big bats? Nobody really knows, and it doesn't actually have a real answer, as half the stuff we're working from is unfinished notes that were then regurgitated by Christopher Tolkien. That's too mean. But anyway, I really like to think of them as something monstrous and bat-like, as the main reference is generally to the shape and form of the creature. And then, what about GûLVAHAR? Has he ever actually been called a vampire? I don't think he has, but he so clearly is intended to be that it just felt like the obvious way to go for me. Also, I'm pretty sure one of his rules at least at one point was called vampiric something, so I don't know, there you are. He's a vampire. Case closed. Once the colors were where I wanted them to be, I started highlighting it back up using various different techniques. From sponging highlights on for the larger sections of skin and flat areas, to dry brushing for the fur, and finally doing some specific edge highlights to the face and other specific areas I wanted to draw attention to or I felt needed that extra pop of detail. Finally, I broke out a pure white as well as a yellow to add a little bit of pops to certain area before going in with a couple of different shades again to add a little bit of, while not recess shading specifically, but just to help break up some of the colors and depthen some of those shadows. And really that's it, honestly, save from a eventual varnish, some tufts, and I'm thinking about maybe going in and applying some gore. I love this thing. It looks so good with the rest of my Angmar models. It's truly unique, and it's just super cool to finally have a GûLVAHAR for my army, which means I do need to make some werewolves finally, so we'll get to that eventually. But for now, thank you so much for being here. Let's take a look at this, and we're back.